Welcome back to Juvenile Justice Policy CRJU 303A. Today we'll be talking about schools and delinquency. Schools are more than just places of learning. They are critical environments that can either protect against or contribute to juvenile delinquency. In this chapter, we will examine the factors within schools that influence youth behavior, focusing on both protective factors that reduce the likelihood of delinquency and risk factors that may increase it. We will explore how the fear of school violence affects students' daily experiences and learning outcomes, the risks associated with chronic absenteeism, and the programs and interventions schools implement to prevent delinquency and promote safe, supportive learning environments. By understanding these dynamics, students will gain insight into how educational settings can shape behavior and contribute to both prevention and intervention strategies. Let's consider your discussion board topic for this week. Consider the scenario of Samantha, a ninth grader who recently underwent some behavioral changes, including truancy, bullying, and a false report of theft implicating another student. As vice principal, your role is to investigate the matter thoroughly, ensure the safety and well-being of all students involved, and maintain school policies. Questions arise such as, is this a violation of school codes or the law? How should Samantha be handled, and how should the falsely accused student be handled? What role does the school resource officer play once it is discovered that the police report was false? How should bullying and ongoing conflicts be addressed to prevent recurrence? Should juvenile court become involved, and why or why not? This scenario illustrates how schools encounter both behavioral and legal challenges in managing student interactions and highlights the importance of understanding risk and protective factors within school settings. Education is one of the most important stepping stones to future opportunities and economic success. In today's economy, higher levels of education consistently correlate with higher earnings. For example, individuals with doctoral or professional degrees earned more than 3 times the median weekly income of those without a high school diploma in 2018. Similarly, those with a bachelor's degree earned over $1,100 per week, while individuals without a high school diploma earned less than $1,000 a week. In addition to increasing earnings, education reduces the risk of unemployment. In 2019, workers without a high school diploma had the highest unemployment rate at 5.4%, while those with graduate degrees had the lowest at 1.1%. Providing meaningful educational opportunities is especially important for youth labeled as delinquent or in need of supervision, as education can help them become productive members of society and keep them engaged in the school environment. In recent years, schools and the juvenile justice system have adopted a public health approach to understanding delinquency. This approach is similar to how a doctor diagnoses and treats a patient. For example, a patient complaining of back pain may be examined physically, asked about family history, and questioned about daily routines that can contribute to the problem. Once all information is gathered, the doctor provides strategies to reduce the risk of further injury, such as modifying daily habits, exercising, or losing weight. Similarly, the risk factor paradigm identifies the underlying causes of delinquent behavior and provides ways to prevent or reduce these risks. Risk factors are conditions that increase the likelihood of future offending. They can be biological, such as perinatal or prenatal complications, psychological or behavioral, such as personality traits or cognitive deficits, family-related, including structure, parenting, or abuse, peer-related, including negative influence from friends, school-related, such as poor policies or low engagement, and neighborhood-related, including exposure to crime or lack of resources. However, having risk factors does not guarantee delinquent behavior. Protective factors act as buffers, reducing the influence of risks. These can include the absence of risks, such as a child not living in poverty, or positive interventions, such as strong mentoring relationships or supportive school environments. Protective factors can come from the individual, the school, or the family and community. Schools play a central role in shaping youth behavior because children spend more time at school than almost anywhere else outside the home. Schools can be sources of both risk and protective factors. Negative peer influence, poor policies, or lack of support can increase risk, while mentoring, engagement in school activities, and supportive programs can strengthen protective factors. By identifying risk factors and developing strategies to mitigate their influence while simultaneously enhancing protective factors, schools can help prevent delinquency and foster positive development in youth. In conclusion, understanding both the risk and protective factors is essential for preventing delinquency. Schools, as institutions where children spend a significant portion of their time, are uniquely positioned to observe, influence, and guide youth behavior. The balance between risk and protective factors plays a critical role in determining whether a child may be more or less likely to engage in future delinquent behavior. When we talk about preventing delinquency in schools, it's important to begin with the overall health of children and adolescents. Researchers have long been concerned with health disparities among youth, meaning preventable differences in disease, injury, and violence that occur between groups of young people. These disparities also reflect the fact that some youth lack equal access to the resources and opportunities needed to maintain good health. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention explains that socially disadvantaged populations can be defined by characteristics such as race, ethnicity, gender, income, disability, geographic location, education level, or sexual orientation. Importantly, these disparities are not random. They stem from both historical and ongoing unequal distribution of social, political, economic, and environmental resources. Poverty, environmental risks, unequal access to health care, individual behavioral characteristics, and inequalities within education all contribute to these gaps. In the school environment specifically, any child who differs from the perceived social norm is vulnerable to becoming socially disadvantaged. This sense of difference can lead to alienation, risky behavior, and an increased likelihood of delinquency or victimization. Research supports these concerns. For example, findings from the National Youth Risk Behavior Survey show that LGBTQ+ adolescents experience multiple health and safety challenges at significantly higher rates than their peers. They are more likely to experience dating violence, to be bullied either in person or online, and to have been tested for sexually transmitted diseases. They are twice as likely to use illegal drugs, and nearly half reported considering suicide. Similar struggles impact other socially disadvantaged groups, including racial and ethnic minorities, youth living in poverty, and young people who are obese or otherwise marginalized. Because these challenges are so widespread, focusing on adolescent health is essential in preventing delinquency. Traditionally, efforts have centered on specific risky behaviors such as early sexual activity, tobacco use, truancy, obesity, and violence. More recent approaches, however, shift the emphasis from reacting to risks to strengthening protective factors. Protective factors are individual characteristics or environmental conditions that help buffer youth from the negative effects of stress or disadvantage. They increase a child's ability to navigate challenges and build social and emotional competence. For example, academic achievement can serve as a protective factor by promoting engagement, confidence, and long-term goal setting. Although schools cannot eliminate all risks, they can intentionally cultivate protective factors that improve student well-being and reduce the likelihood of delinquency. One of the strongest protective factors identified in school environments is school connectedness, the extent to which students feel cared for, supported, and included within their school community. Children who feel alienated or isolated are at significantly higher risk of delinquency, largely because they lack meaningful connections to adults, peers, and the academic mission of the school. Students who are most vulnerable to disconnection often include socially disadvantaged groups such as LGBTQ+, racial and ethnic minorities, students living in poverty, and young people struggling with obesity or other stigmatized traits. Homeless students and students with chronic absenteeism, especially those whose absences stem from circumstances outside their control, also frequently experience low school connectedness. Research shows clear benefits for students who do feel connected at school. These students are less likely to engage in risky or delinquent behaviors and are more likely to demonstrate stronger academic achievement, including higher grades and test scores, better attendance, and a longer commitment to staying in school. The effects do not stop in adolescence. Steiner and his colleagues found that youth who felt connected to school carried those benefits into adulthood, showing lower rates of mental health challenges, substance use, violence, and risky sexual behavior. School connectedness can be strengthened through four main factors: adult support, positive peer groups, commitment to education, and a positive school environment. Students tend to feel more connected when they perceive that adults genuinely care about their learning and about them as individuals. Instruction that reflects the diverse realities and experiences of the student body also increases engagement and belonging. When we examine these factors, Travis Hirschi's social bonding theory provides a useful framework for understanding why connectedness matters. He argued that delinquency arises when social bonds are weak or absent. These bonds, attachment, commitment, involvement, and belief, operate in many of the same ways that school connectedness does. Attachment refers to the emotional ties a youth has with pro-social adults. When those adults model law-abiding behavior and interact meaningfully with young people, youth are more likely to emulate positive conduct. Commitment involves the student's investment in conventional goals, like education. If students believe their future opportunities depend on academic success, they are less likely to jeopardize those opportunities through delinquency. A positive peer culture and the desire to fit in with pro-social groups reinforce this commitment. The third bond, involvement, suggests that students who are busy with structured, meaningful activities have fewer opportunities to engage in delinquent behavior. Effective classroom management, extracurricular activities, vocational programs, mentoring, service learning, and creative projects all provide students with healthy, rewarding ways to spend their time. Finally, belief refers to a young person's acceptance of the norms and values of their environment. When schools provide a consistent, fair, and respectful climate, one where rules are clear, viewpoints are respected, and students have a voice in shaping expectations, youth are more likely to internalize pro-social norms and follow them. Parent engagement is a strong protective factor that supports student success. When schools actively involve parents and family members, they build collaborative relationships that reinforce children's learning, development, and health across home, school, and community settings. Research shows that students whose parents are engaged tend to behave better, achieve higher academically, develop stronger social skills, and are less likely to engage in risky behaviors, such as substance use or early sexual activity. Parents are also more likely to participate when they feel welcomed and expected by teachers and school staff. To encourage involvement, many schools have created accessible and creative engagement opportunities. Examples include online tools that let parents help students choose healthy cafeteria meals, stress relief workshops for caregivers, and programs like Watchdogs in Cumberland, Maryland. In that program, fathers and father figures volunteer as hall monitors and mentors, helping support safety and positive relationships throughout the school. Schools are central to supporting children's physical and mental health simply because of the amount of time young people spend there. Millions of students attend school each day, and roughly a quarter of children, ages 2 to 8, have chronic health conditions such as asthma, obesity, or behavioral difficulties. Because students spend so much of their daily and yearly hours in school, the school environment inevitably plays a major role in their overall well-being. Academic performance and health are tightly connected. Students with poorer grades are far more likely to engage in risky behaviors, including early sexual activity, substance use, and violence. To help students stay healthy and academically engaged, schools commonly offer physical education, health education, and a range of health services. PE classes promote fitness, teamwork, and basic movement skills, while health education teaches students about disease prevention, mental and emotional health, injury prevention, nutrition, and avoiding substances. Most districts also require schools to have policies for medication administration, first aid, chronic condition management, and violence prevention, often supported by school nurses and other licensed health professionals. Nutrition services are another critical component. More than 30 million children rely on free or reduced price meals, and hunger strongly undermines academic performance. Schools have expanded meal programs, especially during COVID, through drive-through pickup, bus route food delivery, and weekend food backpacks. Pandemic EBT also helped reduce child hunger during school closures. Mental health needs among youth have risen sharply, with more than one-third of high school students reporting persistent sadness or hopelessness, and 1 in 6 making a suicide plan. In response, some districts offer counseling, group interventions, mental health screenings, and referrals. Schools also increasingly address environmental health issues such as air quality, pest control, lead testing, and limiting vaping within school buildings. Because environmental hazards can negatively affect attendance, concentration, and behavior, it's important to address them. Despite these efforts, a school's ability to provide health services is shaped by its financial resources. Many districts lack funding for full-time nurses, robust PE programs, or comprehensive health centers. Per pupil funding varies significantly by community wealth, largely due to property tax disparities, leaving schools in low-income areas with fewer resources and higher health-related risks. While schools provide essential support and protective factors for youth, they can also create or reinforce conditions that contribute to delinquency. Early scholars like Kversis argued that although schools do not directly cause delinquent behavior, the school environment may present risk factors that foster it. When students face barriers to achieving success in school, such as academic struggles, learning difficulties, or unmet educational needs, their sense of self-efficacy can decline. Over time, students may begin to question their own abilities, the value of education, and the relevance of school in their lives. This deterioration in attitude and motivation increases vulnerability to delinquent behavior. Hawkins and Lishner identified several school-related risk factors that contribute to delinquency, including low cognitive ability, poor early academic performance, weak attachment to school, low commitment to academics, grade retention, dropping out, and unsafe school environments. Association with delinquent peers is another significant risk factor, especially when struggling students seek out peers who share similar frustrations and disengagement from school. For youth who are too young to legally drop out, aligning with a peer group or even a gang can become an alternative means of fulfilling needs for achievement, belonging, status, and self-esteem. In these contexts, the peer group can replace the school as the primary source of identity and reinforcement, increasing the likelihood of delinquent behavior. Negative experiences in school can push juveniles towards delinquency, especially when the curriculum feels irrelevant to their future opportunities. Many lower-class students perceive courses in subjects like algebra, physics, or anatomy as disconnected from the jobs available to them, creating frustration and alienation. Polk and Schaefer in 1972 highlighted several ways schools create unfavorable conditions for these students, including lower socioeconomic students enter school with a competitive disadvantage. Physical conditions and learning environments in working-class schools may be inadequate. Early labeling and ability grouping can reduce expectations. Curricula and achievement recognition prioritize college-bound students and neglect those aiming just to finish high school. Research by Yablonsky and Haskell in 1988, Batsich and Hom in 1997, Yogan in 2000, and Kowalski-Jones in 2000 further supports that poor school experiences relate to delinquency. Key points include daily academic failure can lead to frustration and unhappiness. Lessons that don't connect to student needs or aspirations feel irrelevant. And lower-class youth may view school as a prison or babysitting with little opportunity to enjoy learning or recognize their abilities. Impersonal school environments may push students to seek connections in peer groups or gangs outside of school. Polk in 1984 concluded that unpleasant school experiences and limited occupational prospects contribute to the growing number of marginal juveniles at risk of delinquency. Schools today are under tremendous pressure to achieve higher academic performance than ever before, and much of this performance is measured through standardized tests. Funding for schools is often tied to these outcomes, which can incentivize schools to remove underperforming students from accountability measures. One method of doing this is through labeling students as low achievers, slow learners, or learning disabled, or LD, sometimes even before the child enters the first grade. Learning disabilities can include difficulties in reading, math, writing, and language, as well as conditions such as ADHD, autism, or Down syndrome. Students who are labeled LD often face lower expectations from teachers and parents, which can affect their self-esteem, motivation, and academic performance. Teachers communicate expectations both explicitly and implicitly through classroom instruction and interactions, and these perceptions can influence student engagement and school connectedness. Behavioral or emotional challenges may also lead teachers to perceive students negatively, limiting their access to academic success and positive reinforcement. Research shows that students with learning or behavioral disabilities are overrepresented in the juvenile justice system, not because the disabilities cause delinquency, but because school failure, social skill deficits, and inadequate support increase their risk for involvement with the courts. Youth with disabilities may struggle in police and court interactions, where their impairments can be misunderstood, further increasing the risk of negative outcomes. In addition to disability labels, individual characteristics such as race, ethnicity, and gender can shape teacher perceptions. Minority students and lower-income boys are often viewed less favorably, while girls are generally seen as better behaved and more academically responsible. These perceptions, whether accurate or biased, can create patterns that reduce school connectedness, lower academic success, and increase the likelihood of disengagement or delinquency. Overall, labeling and teacher perceptions, whether based on learning ability, behavior, race, or gender, can create self-fulfilling prophecies. Students who are labeled or perceived negatively may face diminished expectations, reduced opportunities for engagement, and a higher risk for negative outcomes both in school and in the juvenile justice system. Grade retention occurs when a school recommends that a student repeat the current grade level for another year. This recommendation is often made for students who experience academic difficulties, behavioral problems, or frequent absences due to illness or relocation. The practice of grade retention has been increasing, largely influenced by state-mandated performance measurements. When students fail to meet the standards on these assessments, they may be retained, regardless of their overall performance throughout the school year. Research indicates that grade retention generally does not improve learning or behavior. In fact, students who are retained often act out more because they recognize that their classmates have moved on without them. Retained students may experience poorer peer relationships, feelings of alienation, lower self-esteem, and a general dislike of school. Although there may be a temporary improvement in academic achievement, it tends to fade within 2 to 3 years. Retained students also tend to have more behavioral problems, lower academic achievement across subjects such as math, reading, and communication skills, and reduced social and emotional well-being. Most importantly, grade retention has been strongly linked to dropping out of school, with research showing that students who are retained are 5 to 11 times more likely to drop out, and the likelihood increases with multiple retentions. Grade retention may seem like a tool to support struggling students, but it may exacerbate the very problems schools aim to address. It has been identified as a significant risk factor in the school-to-prison pipeline, a process in which schools criminalize youth perceived as problems through exclusionary policies and disciplinary practices involving police contact. Socially disadvantaged students are disproportionately affected as they are more likely to experience grade retention and subsequent referral to the juvenile justice system. Given these patterns, grade retention may contribute to higher delinquency rates and perpetuate cycles of school failure and system involvement. School dropout continues to be a major concern for youth and society. Between October 2016 and October 2017, approximately 523,000 15 to 24-year-olds left school without obtaining a high school diploma. This represented about 4.7% of youth enrolled in grades 10 through 12. Dropout rates vary by race, ethnicity, gender, and disability status. In 2017, Latinx students had the highest rate at 6.5%, followed by African Americans at 5.5%, Asian students at 4.7%, and Indian Alaskan natives at 4.4%. Caucasian students had the lowest dropout rate at 3.9%. Males 5.4%, were more likely to drop out than females at 3.9%, and students with disabilities had higher rates than students without disabilities, 6.2% versus 4.6%. The consequences of dropping out are severe. Individuals without a high school diploma earn lower median annual wages, report worse health, and are more likely to use drugs. Dropouts are also estimated to cost taxpayers approximately $272,000 over their lifetime due to lower tax contributions, higher reliance on public assistance, and increased juvenile justice and criminal justice involvement. Research indicates that school dropout is closely linked to factors discussed earlier, including low school connectedness, lack of parental engagement, unaddressed student needs such as mental health issues, and negative teacher perceptions. Studies have found that early aggression and poor academic performance can predict school dropout and later involvement with the police. Negative school experiences, including suspension, expulsion, and grade retention, increase the likelihood of juvenile detention and delinquent behavior. While some students find peer groups in school who share similar frustrations, these groups may also reinforce delinquent behaviors. Violence in schools is another critical factor contributing to dropout rates. Youth have limited capacity to protect themselves, and exposure to violence leads to psychological distress, strained social relationships, aggression, and academic failure. Research shows that racial and ethnic disparities in exposure to school violence, with African American and Latinx students more likely to be victimized than white students. Evidence regarding Asian students are mixed, with some studies indicating less victimization and others showing higher levels of bullying compared to their Latinx peers. Despite efforts to reduce school violence, it persists in everyday interactions, emphasizing the importance of socialization before, during, and after school. Combining with labeling of underachieving or problem students, these factors help explain why some students disengage from school and potentially turn to delinquent behaviors both on and off campus. School safety extends beyond the classroom, focusing not only on whether a child can learn, but also on whether the child can get to school and return home safely. In 2017, approximately 3% of children reported fear of being attacked away from school, with neighborhoods affected by gangs and drugs contributing to dangerous routes. Schools have responded with armed security guards, barred windows, and metal detectors, which can create an environment that resembles a prison for some students. Between July 1, 2016 and June 30, 2017, there were 42 school-associated violent deaths in the United States, including homicides and suicides. About 4% of students aged 12 to 18 reported being afraid of being attacked or harmed at school. Fear of violence may result in absenteeism, decreased academic performance, lower participation in class, and increased negative behaviors. Younger students are more likely to fear for their safety than older students, and fear of violence can also lead some students to carry weapons. Fortunately, school crime and the perceived need for self-protection have been declining over recent years. Despite media coverage, schools are statistically among the safest places for youth. In 2018, there were 836,000 non-fatal victimizations at school, compared to 410,000 away from school. Students who felt safe at school were more likely to report that teachers and peers cared about them. Drug availability in schools has also decreased from 29% in 2001 to 20% in 2017. Schools employ various strategies to maintain safety. By 2017, about 95% of schools had a written student code of conduct outlining prohibited behaviors and corresponding sanctions. Schools also implemented visitor sign-ins, adult supervision in hallways and cafeterias, badges, uniforms, and locker checks. Target hardening measures include cameras, locked entrances, metal detectors, safety closets, and contraband sweeps. Security staff, including guards, school resource officers, and law enforcement, are employed at most schools, with higher usage in urban areas, larger schools, high schools, and schools with more students on free or reduced lunch programs. Emergency planning is another important safety measure. In 2017, over 90% of schools reported written plans for natural disasters, bomb threats, and active shooter events. Students routinely practice lockdowns, evacuations, and shelter-in-place procedures. Teacher and administrator training in school safety is widespread, covering classroom management, behavioral intervention, bullying and cyberbullying prevention, mental health recognition, substance abuse, and crisis response. Although these measures enhance physical safety, they may negatively impact the mental and emotional well-being of students. Repeated lockdown drills in heavily secured school environments can cause stress, fear, and trauma. Reports have included students crying, soiling themselves, and writing farewell letters during lockdown drills. Many experts advocate for the placement of counselors in schools to support students at risk of violence or self-harm. Counselors can help address behavioral concerns, prevent escalation, and respond to students exhibiting warning signs, which may be more effective and humane than intensive security measures alone. Studies of school shooter incidents show that almost all shooters exhibited concerning behaviors prior to the incident, highlighting the need for mental health interventions over punitive or restrictive measures. Even though reports of bullying in schools have declined from 29% to 20% between 2005 and 2017, the impact of bullying on student attendance and academic success remains significant. Bullying, whether through physical threats, attacks, or the internet, is defined as unwanted, aggressive behavior involving observed or perceived power imbalance and either repeated acts or a high likelihood of repetition. Bullying is a global concern, and research has focused on the types and frequency of bullying, the characteristics of both victims and perpetrators, and the negative outcomes resulting from bullying. In 2017, children ages 12 to 18 reported being the target of rumors, 13%, being made fun of, called names, or insulted, 13%, being pushed, shoved, tripped, or spat on, 5%, being excluded from activities, 5%, threatened with harm, 4%, coerced to do unwanted actions, 2%, and having property destroyed, 1%. Reports of bullying are highest in middle school and decrease through high school. Bullying is more common in rural areas than urban areas and occurs most frequently in hallways, classrooms, cafeterias, outdoors, bathrooms, locker rooms, and on school buses. About 15% of students reported being bullied online or by text. Gender differences exist in bullying, with girls experiencing higher rates of overall bullying and cyberbullying, while boys report higher rates of physical bullying. African American and white students report higher rates of bullying than Latinx and Asian students. Victims of bullying report negative effects on self-esteem, 27%, schoolwork and relationships, 19%, and physical health, 14%. Cyberbullying has increased in recent years, as adolescents embrace online communication. In 2016 to 2017, 15% of students reported being cyberbullied, with females experiencing higher rates than males, 21% to 7%, and Caucasian students more often than students of other races. High school students report higher rates of cyberbullying than middle school students. Victims are often also perpetrators, with some students engaging in cyberbullying multiple times. Cyberbullying most commonly occurs through instant messaging and is often used more frequently than in-person bullying behaviors. Parents experience 3 stages in dealing with bullying: discovering, reporting, and living with the aftermath. Parents often face resistance from school officials in addressing bullying, sometimes leaving them with the choice to either remove their child from the school or allow victimization to continue. School-based interventions for bullying are limited, but parent-teacher conferences and loss of privileges have been shown to reduce repeat incidents. State legislation has largely placed responsibility on schools to address bullying, including cyberbullying. Schools may be required to implement prevention programs, develop policies for identification and sanctions, provide teacher education, and incorporate bullying prevention into character education programs. These programs focus on developing traits such as courage, respect, honesty, citizenship, kindness, self-control, and perseverance, while actively discouraging bullying and violence. Bullying and cyberbullying are strongly associated with negative school experiences and increased risk of dropping out, making school-based interventions and state oversight critical for student safety and well-being. Truancy is defined as chronic or habitual absenteeism from school. Estimates suggest that between 10.8% and 11.1% of students ages 12 to 17 in the United States experience truancy, with about 16% engaging in chronic truancy, defined as missing more than 15 days of school per year. Research indicates that chronic absences early in the school year predict academic challenges and increase the likelihood of dropping out. Missing the first 20 days of a school year, or 10% of instructional time in the first year of high school, significantly increases a student's risk of dropping out. Truancy is associated with delinquent behavior and long-term negative outcomes in adulthood. Being absent from school allows juveniles to be unsupervised, increasing opportunities to engage in antisocial or violent behaviors. Students who are truant often skip school in groups, further elevating the risk of delinquency. In the long term, lack of education contributes to unemployment, underemployment, substance use, reliance on government aid programs, health issues, and decreased adult productivity. Truancy is therefore a critical issue for schools to address. All states have compulsory attendance laws that define school enrollment requirements, age ranges, excused absences, and responses to chronic absences. These laws often include a graduated scale of interventions, beginning with family involvement through calls, letters, or emails, and escalating to warnings, behavior contracts, student attendance review boards, or petitions to the juvenile courts. Juvenile court involvement is typically a last resort when other interventions fail. For example, Florida's attendance statutes require daily monitoring of student attendance, documentation of absences and tardiness, and implementation of district attendance policies. Parents are legally responsible for ensuring their children attend school, and repeated unexcused absences can result in court proceedings, fines, community service, counseling, or restrictions on driving privileges. Alaska requires all children ages 7 to 16 to attend public school, defines each 5 days of unlawful absence as a separate violation, and mandates district procedures to prevent and reduce truancy. Bullying, school violence, and other factors such as lack of parental involvement, low school connectedness, health issues, and socialization with delinquent peers contribute to truancy. School victimization weakens social bonds with teachers, peers, and school activities, which have been linked to delinquent behavior. Students who feel unwelcome, bored, or disconnected from school, or whose families are disengaged or face language, relocation, or socioeconomic barriers are more likely to be truant. Transportation challenges, including reliance on school buses or unsafe walking condition, also contribute to absenteeism. Traditional responses to truancy have included exclusionary policies like suspensions and expulsions. Research has shown that such policies can actually worsen outcomes by lowering attendance, self-esteem, academic performance, and graduation rates, while increasing anxiety, delinquency, victimization, and risk of arrest. Both bullying and truancy, along with other behavioral issues, have led schools to involve the juvenile justice system, sometimes labeling these behaviors as status offenses. This involvement can escalate to more severe sanctions and secure detention. The increased use of zero-tolerance policies and over-reliance on juvenile court referrals has contributed to the school-to-prison pipeline. Minority students and students with disabilities are disproportionately affected, often pushed out of classrooms and into the justice system for nonviolent offenses such as willful defiance or disorderly conduct. For example, African American students are suspended at rates 3 times higher than Caucasian students, and students with disabilities represent 12% of the school population, but account for a majority of students physically restrained or referred to law enforcement. These disparities have prompted federal attention and led to changes in discipline policies, including limiting police involvement in school disciplinary matters. Court decisions now affirm that all children have a right to education, and students found delinquent or engaging in status offenses cannot be excluded from school without due process. School counselors and educators increasingly recognize the need for additional programming, teacher training, and interventions to address both academic and behavioral issues. With better understanding and strategies, schools can retain students, address problem behaviors, and reduce reliance on punitive exclusionary practices. Research consistently shows that early intervention is critical for academic success. reducing abuse and neglect, and preventing or diverting youth from delinquency. Schools are often the first to notice antisocial behaviors, making them key players in identifying at-risk youth and implementing preventative programs. The Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, or OJJDP, has highlighted a range of school-based programs that use evidence-based practices to prevent delinquency. These include classroom and behavior management programs, multi-component classroom-based programs, social competence promotion and curricula, conflict resolution and violence prevention curricula, bullying prevention programs, after-school recreation programs, mentoring programs, school organization programs, and comprehensive community interventions. Teachers play a dual role in both academic instruction and social skill development. Effective classroom management fosters accountability, encourages participation, and ensures students understand both the curriculum and behavioral expectations. Schools that allow teachers autonomy in classroom management also tend to provide more professional development opportunities, helping teachers integrate school-wide strategies and improve student engagement. Positive Youth Development, or PYD, has emerged as a key intervention strategy. PYD programs focus on 6 areas of a child's life: work, education, relationships, community, health, and creativity. These programs emphasize physical and psychological safety, the development of supportive relationships with adults and peers, and fostering a sense of belonging and personal efficacy. PYD programs also promote positive social norms, such as recognizing student achievements through awards or responsibilities, and provide structured opportunities for skill development, such as vocational experiences or school leadership roles. Anti-bullying programs, such as the ALWIS Bullying Prevention Program, have been effective in reducing bullying and antisocial behaviors while improving the overall social climate of schools. Mentoring programs, which build sustained positive relationships between adults and youth, have been shown to increase high school graduation rates, improve behavior and self-esteem, strengthen relationships, and reduce drug and alcohol use. Successful mentoring requires careful selection, training, and at least a year-long commitment from mentors. Schools are also encouraging community service and volunteerism as a means of fostering personal growth and social responsibility. Volunteer programs provide psychological, social, and cognitive benefits and can connect students with adults and opportunities that influence future employment or educational aspirations. Examples include service requirements for graduation in Washington, D.C., and Florida's Bright Future Scholarship, which requires students to complete 100 service hours to earn funding for college. Parental engagement remains essential for academic achievement and behavioral support. Schools foster family involvement through open houses, parent-teacher conferences, family-centered events, volunteer opportunities, and curricula like promoting alternative thinking strategies, or PATHs, which improve children's social and emotional competencies. Truancy is a significant risk factor for academic failure and delinquency. Effective strategies to address absenteeism include monitoring attendance to identify patterns early, implementing multi-pronged prevention and intervention plans such as health initiatives, reward systems and regular communication with parents, and providing personalized interventions through mental health services, community partnerships, truancy courts, and juvenile justice collaboration. Finally, alternative education programs serve students who have been expelled or are otherwise marginalized. These programs often provide enhanced skills training, life skills development, community internships, and increased integration between schools and communities. Research indicates that alternative education programs can improve attendance, motivation, and graduation rates while reducing the negative behaviors that initially led students to require alternative placement. Let's talk briefly about the differences between DARE and GREAT. Drug Abuse Resistance Education, or DARE, was a program developed in 1983 in Los Angeles by the Los Angeles Police Department. If you did not attend a school with a DARE program, allow me to regale you with my personal recollection of the DARE program from sometime between 2001 and 2005. 2 or 3 officers came into our gymnasium where there were approximately 100 kids. I went to a very small elementary school. They brought examples of the different types of drugs, including cocaine, meth, and marijuana. They handed out pledge agreements where each of the elementary school age students signed a sworn statement that they would never do drugs ever. It was also indicated that if we didn't sign the pledge and did do drugs, we would die. They also brought in a drug sniffing dog, which we were not allowed to pet because he was working, which is fair, but I distinctly remember being upset about. What I and many students in my school learned after that encounter was this: what certain drugs looked like, where we were most likely to find, quote, shady drug dealers, and not all dogs can be pet. Prior to that assembly, I don't think I personally knew anything about drugs. The Stephen West and Carrie O'Neill study in 2004 indicated that the DARE program was ineffective. Comparing the control group to the DARE program group, the distinction between effectiveness was so minimal that it was chalked up to the standard chance variable. In 2023, Lee Gaines and Nicole Cohen reflected on the failures of the DARE program. They stated that DARE was taught by police officers in classrooms nationwide. Their presentations warned students about the dangers of substance use and told kids to just say no to drugs. It was a message that was repeated in PSAs and cheesy songs, and former First Lady Nancy Reagan even made it one of her major causes. They continue. For years, anti-drug curriculums exaggerated the effects of certain types of substance use. For example, students were taught that using cannabis would destroy their brain or make them dumb. And while there is data to suggest that cannabis use can have detrimental effects, particularly for young people, that messaging didn't always match students' lived experiences. Ultimately, researchers tend to agree that the aggressive messaging and sometimes false narratives surrounding the effects of certain drugs was ultimately what made DARE ineffective. Many experts have argued that the model of DARE, or as it is now known, keeping it real, needs a dramatic shift. Use of police officers as educators risk perpetuating systemic inequities. Harm reduction models are more effective statistically than the resistance-based approach of DARE, and students have reported that they prefer a narrative story-driven, honest dialogue compared to the scare model typically equipped in DARE programs. What is so great about GREAT? The Gang Resistance Education and Awareness Training, or GREAT, was developed by Phoenix law enforcement agencies in 1991. According to research from Finn Egg Esbenson, Dana Peterson, Terrence Taylor, and Wayne Osgood in 2012, GREAT demonstrates promise in reducing gang membership and improving pro-social attitudes among students. The evaluation conducted across 31 schools shows a 39% reduction in gang membership odds for participants alongside positive changes in attitudes towards law enforcement. However, the program did not significantly reduce delinquency or violent offending, suggesting that its role is only a component of a broader preventative strategy. The GREAT learning model emphasizes interactive learning methods rather than a lecture-style teaching methodology. It's focused on social competencies and life skills, not just gang and drug rejection, was targeted to middle school level students, which research suggests is the best place and time for such trainings, and focused on drug resistance skills rather than adopting DARE's scare approach. The school environment plays a critical role in the lives of children, second only to the family. Children spend significant portions of their time with teachers, administrators, staff, and peers, making schools central to their social, emotional, mental, and physical development. For students who navigate the educational system successfully, completing high school and pursuing higher education or employment is achievable. These students typically benefit from protective factors that help mitigate the risk factors they encounter. However, many youth face persistent risk factors from birth or early childhood. For these students, simply attending school safely can be a challenge. Factors such as curricula that lack relevance to their lives, fear of violence, negative labeling by teachers or peers, learning or behavioral difficulties, and an unsupportive school culture can lead students to avoid school altogether. In some cases, chronic truancy or associating with peers who also struggle may seem like the only viable option. which can increase the likelihood of delinquency and eventual involvement with the criminal justice system. Schools aim to provide inclusive and safe environments, but achieving this goal is challenging. Programs addressing common social, emotional, and behavioral issues often collide with zero-tolerance policies, which treat all violations uniformly. Students who react to victimization may face the same consequences as those who initiated the behavior, reinforcing the school-to-prison pipeline. Minority students, students from low-income families, and students with disabilities are disproportionately affected, increasing their risk of exclusion and future delinquency. Evidence suggests that engaging students, connecting them to meaningful curricula, and involving families in education are effective strategies for retaining students and promoting academic success. Modern schools must address not only academics, math, reading, and science, but also the social, emotional, mental, and physical needs of youth. Supporting at-risk students requires a comprehensive approach that combines evidence-based practices, research-informed interventions, and flexible, individualized responses to behavioral changes. Ultimately, schools are tasked with balancing these responsibilities while managing public scrutiny, legislative mandates, and budget constraints. By prioritizing holistic approaches that support all students, particularly those most at risk, schools can reduce delinquency, improve academic outcomes, and foster environments where every child has the opportunity to thrive. I'll see you in Chapter 5.